How is it that different pianists can see the same piece and play it in very different ways? And is there a correct way that you're supposed to play a piece? Well, to date we have 4 pianists playing the exact same piece, and I'm going to explain exactly why they play it so differently. So let me know in the comments who you think played it better. Let's get into it. The piece that we're going to watch is Clair de Lune by Debussy, and first up is Lang Lang. So for me, the opening of this piece of music is supposed to be really still and kind of contemplative, word of the day. And the reason I think that is because, one, the start of the music is marked pianissimo, which means to play very quietly, but also it has con sordina in there, which means to use the left pedal on a piano. Whenever you play a key on an acoustic piano, it hits 3 strings that all sound exactly the same, and if you hold the left pedal on a piano, it only hits 2 of those strings, which thins the sound. So that tells me that the piece is supposed to sound kind of quiet and empty. For me, personally, I think Lang Lang plays this a little bit too strong and present. You could easily argue that playing it slightly more present makes it more expressive, and Lang Lang plays very expressively, so that would make sense. Okay, next we have Khatia Buniatishvili. So interestingly, Khatia does start this piece a lot more still sounding than Lang Lang did. And you can even see it in the body language, where Lang Lang was moving around a little bit more from the very start. Khatia Buniatishvili is playing it where she's kind of staying in one place for most of the opening of the piece. She's still able to express a lot of those melody notes, but it's in a much more contained way, which means there's a lot of room to grow in the rest of the piece of music. Next, we have Evgeny Kissin. So as a player, Kissin is very expressive, but is also very matter-of-fact. He feels like a very secure player. The way that he plays the notes feels very solid. And you can hear this at the beginning of this piece when he plays. It feels very downward rather than across. Whereas Lang Lang and Khatia played in a more fluid horizontal motion, Kissin seems to play in a more downward motion in order to make those notes sing out. Okay, next we have Daniel Barenboim. So Daniel Barenboim obviously starts this piece a lot quicker than the previous 3. And while Daniel Barenboim is one of my all-time favourite pianists, I do prefer this piece kind of slower because it means you can express the notes more. But it also goes to show that even the speed of the piece is kind of up for debate because all that's written in the music is andante tre expressive. And andante just means a kind of walking pace, but people walk at different paces. In the next part of the music, the notes are kind of falling, and to me, that means you want to fall with it. You need to kind of give it some momentum, so it feels like the music is sinking. And I think that sinking feeling continues all the way down until you kind of get a repeat of the opening. But interestingly, Lang Lang decides to play this much slower and more deliberately, so each of the notes is placed as it's going through this section of the music. However, Lang Lang treats the second falling section different from the first. So the first one, he's more deliberate with each of the notes, and then the second time he's much quieter. And there's no reason not to do that. I wonder why he's chosen to do that though. What is the story that he's trying to tell with the notes that means he's playing those two sections so differently? Now, for this falling section, Khatia does give it a bit more momentum than Lang Lang did as well. I would probably push through that slightly more to give it more of a falling feeling. But once again, like Lang Lang, it's a perfectly valid way of playing this piece of music and interpreting it. So interestingly, he kind of does a combination of what Lang Lang and Khatia did, which is he plays with forward momentum and it feels like it's falling, but occasionally he kind of slows it down and lingers on some of the notes. Which once again is a kind of interesting way of interpreting it. It's almost like instead of falling down just a flat gradient, you're kind of getting a gradient where it slowly peters off in certain places. Because Daniel Barenboim has a lot more momentum in this piece of music, when he gets to the falling section, out of the four pianists, he's the one that pushed through that and gave it momentum the most. Which I do like, and I do think it is that momentum that means when you get to here, you kind of fallen to the bottom and you're bouncing back up to the top. Yeah, interestingly, this is something that performing pianists do a lot more than people who are just learning piano. And that is to really sing out the notes. Because if you imagine that you're doing a performance for hundreds of people, and people are probably quite far away from the piano, you've got to really express the notes and make them sing out in order to make them heard and felt for everyone that's in the room. It's a little bit of a double-edged sword though, because once again, it kind of compromises the stillness of the music. So one thing I'm noticing about this part of the music is that I can really hear the bass notes that she's playing, and that might be to do with the acoustics. You can get away with playing a little bit more present when you're in a larger room because the sound disperses. I actually really like in this section how careful he is at placing that melody at the top and making it sing out, and he's almost waiting for the highest notes so that they feel even more satisfying when he plays them. It's very nice. I think in music, whenever you have a melody that's kind of really clear like this, the more you can express that melody and make that melody sing out, the better. The hard part is trying to balance that with keeping the flow of the music and keeping the feeling of the music introverted or extroverted, whatever the music is trying to express. Now, I also think that Daniel Barenboim, out of the four, has the biggest separation between the chords at the bottom and the melody at the top, which I also really like because it means that that melody is singing out over the top of the colour that is created by the chords. I just wish, for my taste, that it slowed it down just a little bit, just so we can really feel it. But I'm not going to argue with Daniel Barenboim. He can play it exactly how he wants. So this is by far my favourite part of this entire piece, because it goes against your expectations so much. You get this real low bass note, and then these kind of big chords at the top, but you've got to play them in such a quiet and scared kind of way. Now, once again, Lang Lang, to me, plays this a little bit too forward and present. So for the first one, he plays it really quietly, which I like. But for the second one, to me, he plays it a little bit too full. And because the next section is supposed to get louder and more animated as it goes on, to me, you almost want this section to be the complete opposite of that. So you've got a lot of room to grow over the next 30 seconds of music. So interestingly, she also does the exact same thing as Lang Lang for this high section. She plays the first one really still. But then she plays the second one much more full. And because in the first one, the melody is only falling, and in the second one, the melody goes up before falling, the second one to me definitely does want to be expressed slightly more, but I would keep it still very, very small. So for this part, Kissin is actually the only one so far that's played both of these two high chord parts evenly. He actually uses a lot more forward momentum than Khatia and Lang Lang did, so it feels like it's falling. But for the second one, while he has a really expressive melody, it isn't changing the overall feel of the music. He kind of interprets this in much the same way as Kissin did. He gives those top chords a lot of momentum falling down, and he also keeps both of the melodic parts relatively the same volume, just expressing that top note on the second one a little bit more, which I like. It gives you a lot of room to grow when you do get to that section that does start building. over those last 4 chords that you play, the third one he played much louder than the previous 2, and this section actually only tells you to get quieter, so once again he's taking a little bit of artistic license. The reason it tells you to get quieter is because the next section's kind of got to emerge from nothing. It's the bit that most people will probably know from this piece. The interesting thing about this piece in general is that there is a lot of room for interpretation. Beyond what's actually written in the piece of music, there is a lot of wiggle room as to how you want to play it, based on how you feel the music is supposed to be, and what the music is supposed to express. So I really like the way that she built the music through that more animated section that's supposed to get louder. And also you can hear in those last 4 chords that she did just gradually bring each one of them down so that you end up in that next section really small. So to me, Kissin didn't create quite the big animated dramatic moment that Khatia created. But for the last 4 chords, he definitely was able to bring it back down again. And once again, he didn't have any of those chords louder like Lang Lang did. But having brought it down with those 4 chords, interestingly, he's the first one that's kind of gone into the next section a bit more head on. He didn't emerge so much from those 4 chords. So yeah, I think actually out of the 4 pianists, Daniel Barenboim is able to build this section much more excitingly than the other 3. It almost feels like he's holding back, but then lets go towards the end of the section. And this is where the speed that Daniel Barenboim is playing it is kind of an advantage, because if you already have forward momentum and it feels like it's pressing forward, when you get sections that build momentum and get louder like this, it's much easier to kind of push. For the last 4 chords, however, I think he kind of played it a little bit like Lang Lang, where it was less diminishing in sound each time, and he was making that note stand out quite a lot. Which once again is a perfectly valid way of playing it, but I prefer the way that Khatia and Kissin played it. I've got to say, out of the 4 performances, I would probably do little bits from each one, but my favourite overall performance was Khatia's performance. And I think it goes to show that there is a lot of artistic license you can take with pieces, and a lot of different players will play them very differently. So let me know in the comments which one of the 4 that you preferred, because it might be very different to the one I preferred. And if you want to see my reaction to my subscribers playing, then head on through, and I will see you there.